Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar on migrating from on-premise to cloud-native hybrid SOC or Azure native threat detection and response. Today I'm joined by Sagi Heim, Chief Solution Architect, as well as Sinu Peter, Security Operations Specialist. My name is Ben Chant. I'll be moderating today. I'm a cyber evangelist and product marketer here at Cyberproof. Just before we go on with the presentation, just a couple of housekeeping items. If for any reason you lose connection or run out of battery or unable to join the call, don't worry, we will be sending you a recorded version of this. And I think we're ready to go. So I'll start with you, Sinu, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone, those listening online and also in the recording. My name is Sinu. I work as a more of a cyber operations specialist. I've been in the cyber and IT space for a good few years, evolving from your Microsoft certified systems engineer kind of a guy, moving into cloud security, designing, implementing, operating architectures that enable wider security adoption. And today I'll be sharing some experiences that I've come across with our customers and give you hopefully some tips and tricks that can sort of separate the wood from the trees, if you get what I mean. And I would welcome any questions and comments during the course of the presentation. And those of you who are watching the recording as well, please don't hesitate to reach out. Sagi?
Thank you, Sino. So my name is Sagi. I'm in the industry for around 10 years doing system and security. In Cyberproof, I'm leading the cloud security solution architect. We are the team that are working with our customers in order to onboard their environment to our services. And we are especially working with solutions like Sentinel and other SIEM solutions. I am also in Microsoft Azure MVP, and I will join today to Sino and Ben in order to show the perspective of the engineering in doing operation like that.
Thanks, Sagi. So yeah, we're blessed with Sagi's presence today as an Azure Microsoft most valuable expert, most valuable professional for 2021. So Sagi will be sharing a lot of his insights from his experience in engineering a lot of these solutions, and Sinu has obviously worked very closely with him in implementing these engagements. So I think we're in a great position with this presentation. So let me go through the agenda very quickly, and then we'll get started. So to give a bit of an outline, today we're going to cover off exactly what some of the challenges are of moving from on-premise to the cloud. We'll base this on anecdotally from our experience with customers and from doing some of the largest implementations globally. What we found, some of the common barriers to adopting Azure Sentinel, Defender for Endpoint and other security technologies within the Azure suite, but also what opportunities this opens up, particularly in terms of moving from cloud-based to cloud-native security analytics. We'll then go through some of the key considerations for migrating to cloud-native security analytics in terms of the key steps that are common for us when we're implementing this kind of engagement. So right from defining the right approach and defining the right strategy for you based on whether you have an on-prem SIEM, or you're already managing a hybrid architecture, or perhaps you've already migrated to the cloud, but you want to go more to a cloud-native solution. And then we'll cover exactly what sort of skills you should be looking at bringing in and recruiting, how you can optimize the log collection normalization process, and then changing your mindset around what a use case is, because this is extremely important when defining your use cases, looking beyond just the log sources in terms of how you can contextualize those in terms of the severity and risk to your business, and how you can migrate that into this new cloud-native environment. And then we'll cover off how we can integrate into your extended security portfolio in terms of Microsoft Defender. And then we'll finish this off with a case study and some Q&As. So as Sinu said, please do submit any questions onto the platform, and we will answer these throughout the call. if we don't have time, then we will seek to answer these afterwards. There are some attachments as well that you can download, so please feel free to download those. Those are very much related to this topic, blogs, data sheets, things like that. So this is really just to, I guess, find in a more humorous way to start this conversation, just underlying the point really that for a lot of organizations that we've seen and we've been working with, migrating to the cloud has, for some of them, depending on their maturity, been very much like landing on a desert planet, which is completely isolated. They don't have the visibility, and they're wondering how we're going to get that visibility without completely bombarding our security analysts with alerts. What sort of new attack surfaces is going to open up? Is there going to be new routes to my key assets from on-prem to cloud that I need to be understanding? How do I transfer a lot of the processes and policies that we adopt on-prem and migrate to the cloud? So we can really empathize with a lot of organizations who feel kind of alien to this kind of move, because it's not just about migrating your digital assets, it's about migrating your security operations and the way that you do things day to day. And it can be very overwhelming, very complex. And it's not just a matter of switching on technologies, it's a matter of customizing how you do that. And the shift to the cloud has really been driven by the pandemic, as we all know. And really, when you look at it, this rapid shift to public cloud has been one of the key areas of interest, which has helped organizations to be able to scale their processes, scale the adoption of microservice architectures, and therefore this revenue has grown significantly by 18 to 19%. Gartner expects this to grow to almost 307 billion, actually. This is not million, billion by end of 2021. In terms of new exposures, this does open up new doors, new entry points for attackers. So any insufficient identity exposed credentials, IDAM has had to have a completely new way of thinking in terms of zero trust. We see it all the time, misconfigurations being the reasons for attackers entering cloud-based architectures, from S3 buckets to Microsoft Azure to containers. All of this is at a threat. But also in terms of having that visibility of APIs. APIs is the new way of integrating software, new way of integrating technologies. So this is opening new doors for attackers. Ultimately, this has caused that increase in attacks by 630%, Gartner predicts, by the end of 2021. So I want to pass over to Sinu. Sinu, can you give a little bit more context in terms of the challenges for the SOC specifically?
Yeah, sure, Ben. So what we see is that, like you mentioned, the adoption of cloud is increasing, but so as the threats that are present with the adoption of this cloud. As a fun fact, we should know that organizations are still shelling out sort of more than 1.5 billion annually for their SIEM services, but they are struggling to fend off these modern threats. And the typical threats of insider threats, persistent threats, application threats are still being not discovered. And typically rule-based and signature-based security systems have failed to prevent the most serious data breaches over the last years. And the cloud has brought in further threats like new types of ransomware, different types of account hijackings, performing crypto miners in the cloud, and also having a lot of automated attacks in the cloud due to its availability and scalability. And the attacks are typically becoming heterogeneous. So a typical attack spans different parts of the enterprise and crosses various resource types. For example, it can start from an IoT device, proceed to an endpoint, spread to a cloud service or to a database, involve multiple user accounts or tenants, and so on. So what we're seeing is that the landscape is also becoming heterogeneous, where we don't have a division on the threats that are visible to the enterprise. And But on the other side, it's not all doom and gloom. We are seeing that the cloud is also bringing opportunities to the SOC. Your security operations can be better enabled for many use cases that they want to use to detect and respond to these changes. Big data is basically changing the way security operations behave. And we usually see these changes every 5 years happening, and a big change is happening right now. The amount of security volume, the amount of data that we can handle has now been traded off against the telemetry. So we are able to get in more data than before. We are able to stop driving blind. So, for example, we are able to perform exercises where we can sort of detect the unknown threats by performing a long-term analytics. Dream bigger. Storage and computing prices have changed over time, and that's now allowing us to open up analytics and machine learning to the security operations activities. We are also able to bring in virtualization and detection analytics, for example, to sort of visualize and move forward in predictive analysis of threats that are coming in. And the recent Forrester report actually tells us that the adoption of these security analytics platforms will sort of lead the pack, and helping organizations to sort of customize this and map it against a risk framework will sort of bring more success to the detection, investigation, and flexibility that a service provider can provide its customer.
Great, thanks, Sinu. And Sagi, I want to pass over to you really, because you've been at the forefront of this. We've seen a lot especially with our large enterprise customers, where they're at that stage where they're wanting to migrate over to a cloud native architecture. There's certain steps that they need to adopt, but they ask us, what are the advantages between going for a cloud-based SIEM solution versus a cloud native? Because there's a lot of technologies out there that claim to be cloud-based, but there is a distinction between cloud natives and cloud-based, isn't there?
Yeah, true. And as someone that been long enough, to see the shift that going from on-prem to the cloud, when I remember when we start in one company and we had requested the VM, so you go to the VM guy and you ask for 8 gig of RAM, and because you don't have, he gets you 4. So always a joke that you request the double amount of resources that you want, and you only get half, because when you go to the on-prem, you saw this large data centers. It's really, really complex and really, really hard to get those resources on-prem. And we see it with our customers when we need those resources. It's really, really hard because it involves a lot of money, and it involves doing a lot of design and order those VMs or those virtual machines, the physical machines that we will use. And we're going to the cloud. We see this shift where it's in a click of a button. So you just need a VM. You just click on a button and you get it. You need some kind of resource, you just get it, and you now pay for the things that you can consume, and you don't longer commit for infrastructure. Year ahead, and you know that you need to reuse them in the cloud. Just can set it up, and when you don't need it, you can just delete it and forget about it. So this is why a lot of security teams are going to the cloud, and by shifting to the cloud, the flexibility and the scalability that they get is enormous. So if we look on the on-prem, and we know that we need now a higher performance, so we need now to process more events, we see that it's hard. And when we go to the cloud, it's really, really easy, because in the click of a button, and you have more VMs, you have more resources, you have more tools that you can use. But I think that a lot of security teams, and not only security, IT teams or company are missing something, and this is the difference between the cloud-based and the cloud native, as you said, Ben. So when you go to the cloud and you see solutions that are cloud-based, you still have the same limitations. It's more easy to deal with it, but you still see the same limitation. Like, you still need to size your VM. You still need to size your database. You still need to scale up when needed. You need to scale it down. And when you go to cloud native and you really understand the power of the native services in the cloud, you really understand how easy to scale, because the cloud provider now dealing with the scale, and the cloud provider now dealing with the increase and the spikes of your usage, and you know really how to do it, and you don't need to deal again with scaling up your infrastructure. And another thing that we see a lot with cloud native and the cloud provider is the DevOps integration and the DevOps approach that enable us, continuous deployment, continuous integration, and it's really easy to deploy configuration, to deploy environment, and to make changes. And the shift from doing everything in the GUI and doing it as a code is really, introduce a lot of pace and a lot of control to the teams, especially when we go to DevSecOps, and we know that we can really get feedback even before it's reached to the solution itself. And one of the examples that I want to show up is when we speak about Azure Sentinel. So Azure Sentinel, for those who doesn't know, is a native to the cloud. So we know that we get it as a service, and we know that we don't need to size now the SIEM. We don't care about how many VMs do we have. We don't care about the disk. We don't care about the memory. We get it as a service. So when we have the spikes, when we need more resource, when we need more power, it's there. And when we don't need it, then we just don't use it. It's very, very easy to collect data from cloud sources because of those native integration that we see in the cloud. In the matter of a click of a button, you're connecting your infrastructure inside your Sentinel. You no longer need to deploy more resources or more collectors. It's there. A lot of the things, because of this native integration, we're getting in terms of the cost, because the events is already there and the cloud provider already provide us those logs. We don't need to pay for it twice. And on the other side, in terms of the operation, we have full DevOps approach, and we can deploy the SIEM in a matter of a second in a code. We can change the configuration, we can add detection rule, we can add reports, everything is a code, which let our team work together and push for better result and faster result. And those are the things that really are changing, changing the world. And this is where, as Sino said, we're no longer looking on SIEM solution. We are looking on analytics platforms. And solutions like Azure Sentinel are really pushing us to have those analytics platforms.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to also highlight that there's another side to this as well, because to a lot of organizations, it's a no-brainer to adopt Azure Sentinel. They've made a strategic investment in Azure. They know that Microsoft have the breadth of 8 trillion threat signals that they can ingest, and they can leverage to have that visibility. And working with an MTL provider like ourselves, we're able to help organizations in a hybrid model to manage that estate for them, and leverage that cloud native capability. But it's not as simple as just switching it on and ingesting the logs and working the magic. There are certain challenges that we've seen when, especially when looking at quite complex environments, multiple tenants, particularly around the use cases, the data ingestion, because from a total cost of ownership perspective, it's a real win-win situation, and that's why we're driving this solution so much, because there is a lower TCO for organizations over time, and there's no infrastructure to manage. There's no maintenance required for that. Everything is seamlessly integrated and updated. Rapid integrations to new services can be onboarded. But there are things that we hear from our customers. It's things that we work closely with Microsoft on, that Microsoft are now looking to fill the void for. And these are some of those challenges which we're working very closely with Microsoft on to address. So things like migrating the use cases from hybrid environments. So when they've got an on-premise SIEM, they even have multiple on-premise and cloud-based SIEMs, for example, but then they need to transition those use cases to Azure Sentinel. So there may be certain testing that they have to do in a staging environment first to be able to make sure everything's working correctly, all the logs are coming in, they're understanding exactly which logs are coming in, which ones are right to the use cases, but which ones they need to be storing for data compliance in a more cost-effective storage solution. They need to be ensuring that they're not ingesting too much in terms of log data, especially log data that isn't necessarily relevant for the SIEM, and then passing that data as well. So there's a lot of default connectors in Sentinel, as we know, that can help organizations to get much faster time to value, but there are also some which aren't supported. So how do they connect certain log sources which don't have those default passes by default? We know Microsoft are working with likes of MDR providers like ourselves to fill that void, but how can they continuously be doing this? And this is where we'll address this slightly later on how you can solve that issue without needing to create those custom APIs in a more kind of seamless way. But we also see that obviously configuring Azure Sentinel to suit your business environment in terms of compliance, any specific roles that you want to be configuring, the log analytics instance, for example, as well, how you're leveraging that to support Azure Sentinel. There may be multiple workspaces, so how are you managing that? What sort of queries do you need to be able to utilize, which are relevant? How are you ingesting threat intel to then enrich those IOCs, for example, or TTPs? And then what kind of skills are required to actually deploy and monitor and continuously update Azure Sentinel for your business? So those are some of the challenges that we see from customers, and we'll cover exactly how you can address those. There's obviously the issue of costs. Now, as we said before, when looking at the operations, the TCO for deploying Sentinel and the rest of Azure security stack is extremely beneficial, and that's why we're seeing this huge uplift in adoption for Azure security stack. But for a lot of organizations, particularly those who are migrating from an on-prem solution, if not managed efficiently, the cost can go up, and there needs to be a closer look at exactly how those logs are being ingested, how you're optimizing some of the parsing and filtering of those logs before they're ingested into a data lake, and then how you ensure you're only ingesting those that are relevant for the use cases that are relevant for your unique threat profile and your business conditions as well. So that's something we'll cover. It's a huge topic which both Cyproof and Microsoft are seeing a lot of questions around. It is something which we're able to help them with. But there is a lot of guidance out there as well. But it's important to look into this guidance and to look to address this and bring in the right experts to help you in that journey. So Sinu, I want to pass this over to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. So you've told us all the problems that we could face if we did move to this. But what I wanted to kind of bring to light is, from our experience, Sagi and I would like to cover some common areas that you will need to consider when performing any migration. And we've picked some of these up while performing migrations on both transition as well as transformational projects for our customers. And we'll try to cover these considerations in general, and also provide you details of some of the innovative approaches being adopted by Cyberproof for our customers. So I'll begin with the first part is, before we do any migration, is of course to look at the right approach. So how do we define the right approach? And typically what we can do is, have an existing architecture, somebody who has an existing on-prem architecture, for example, but also understand what needs to happen next. So choose when and how to integrate a cloud-based security analytics platform into your security operations center. We have to understand why, because as more enterprise services generate security data in the cloud, hauling this back to on-premise becomes expensive and efficient. So this sort of data gravity will increase the requirement of the security analytics to be hosted in the cloud as you migrate workloads. And of course, how. And this can ensure your strategy for security analytics and SIEM plans for the transition, and includes thresholds and timings for progression into each phase. So, for in this example here, the sort of transition state can function as a hybrid architecture where you can actually transition to a permanent state using a cloud native security analytics, or maybe as an infrastructure as a service SIEM. So, of course, we highly recommend the cloud native architecture because of the reduced infrastructure management. But the benefits of native cloud analytics may also accelerate transition plans because of the advanced capabilities, the simplified management. We might be able to advance from 1 to 3 faster. And in Cyberproof, we try to recommend to use a sort of an agnostic platform that does not allow the SOC to feel any difference. So, we still, during this transition, whichever approach you take, we need to maintain the visibility of your alerts and incidents throughout the transition. And in Cyberproof, we use our own native Cyberproof Defense Center platform that acts as that single pane of glass for the SOC analysts, being able to connect to multiple SIEMs, for example, be able to bring in orchestration with your security tools during the transition, but also assist with remediations and automations in the SOC operations. After you define the approach, I guess the next thing to look at is the right skills. And who better to talk to us this apart from Sagi? So, Sagi, do you want to tell us what kind of people we need to do all this?
Thank you, Sino. So yeah, as you said, one of the things that are really important when I think in any project, and especially when working with vendor, is find the right people to the task, because you want you want to assure that the people that doing this process understand the things that they are doing, and bring in the experience from other customers. So I think that in Cyberproof we managed to find the right type of a team that we bring to the table. So most of our program management are people that really know how to organize the management, and how to organize the team leader from Cyberproof and the customer side. And they know how to present to the stakeholders, the, the visibility of the project and the targets that we're trying to achieve, and they provide a very good experience to the stakeholders. And they really know to control how this project is going forward. So with them, of course, we need the technical team. So I think that one of the major challenges that we have in the cloud is that I always say that in the past, and we spoke about moving from on-prem to the cloud. In the past, we had this network team and the storage team and the infrastructure team and so on. And I think that when we go to the cloud, it's like someone put all those skill sets in a ball and mixed very, very hard. And now when we are in the cloud, every VM that you touch, every service that you touch, you need to understand the networking, you understand the storage, you need to understand the requirement. And I think that a lot of the risk that you, Ben, and Sino spoke in the beginning is the misconfiguration of those things in the cloud. So our team are really, really experienced on the cloud environment, and they understand how to make the shift from the on-prem or from to the cloud. And what I really like in the approach that we are taking is we always, guiding the customer. So we are, guiding me in is a shift from the on-prem to the cloud. So we give a lot of information, we give a lot of insights, and we try to train the customer on this environment. So most of our people are even certified around, if it's SC 200, which is a new certificate in Microsoft that is aimed for L1 and L2 tiers that help them mitigate and monitor threats across the Azure platform, whether it's Office 365 or the Azure side. We do have people that are certified in AZ-104, AZ-500, and AZ-400. As we said, we are moving to the cloud. We have DevOps, we have infrastructure. So those skills are beginning to merge, because when we are setting up the environment, when we are setting up the configuration, we are working as a code. Everything is a code for faster recovery, faster deployment, faster improvement and fix when needed. So our people know how to write code, they know security, they know infrastructure, and those skills that together with a great plan really helping the customer make the shift. Now,
I mean, it's almost like sorry. I mean, it's just wanted to say it's almost like bringing in DevOps or data scientist skill sets into the SOC in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of it's now that we're moving to a kind of microservices architecture with security operations and security analytics. Is there a need for, when you're looking to hire people in your team, is there a need for them to be able to always have a DevOps and security analytics background?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I usually say in the job interview when I interview people, I say that this role is a little bit undefined, because the people in our team, they know they do DevOps things, but they are not DevOps engineer. They know to write infrastructure as a code and CI/CD, but they are not a proper DevOps engineer. Our team are doing IT tasks like managing users and setting up environments, but they are not a proper IT guys. And the same goes for the security, because everything that we are doing, as we set up the environment, as we set up the configuration, as we guide the team and helping them with the challenges that they have, we must be a security in our core, so that people understand security. So I'm saying that maybe, after 2 years, 3 years in the team, you won't be a great DevOps engineer, you won't be a great security engineer, you won't be a great IT, but you will know enough, to be very good if you will decide to take one of those approach. And I think this is the unique aspect that Cypress brings to the table.
Absolutely. And in terms of, because I know one of the areas that we speak a lot with customers around the log collection. So can you give a bit of an overview in terms of how you would recommend to listeners to best address the log collection, identifying the right logs, how we can best pass those to not only ensure that we're addressing those less standardized log sources that aren't supported, but also to be able to kind of help reduce the costs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when you go and speak about, log collections, you try to get the right logs. And I always say that security monitoring is just like regular monitoring. In the end, you really, really want to build the trust behind your monitor solution, because if you will have too many alerts or too many information, we will lose the trust, because we say, oh, okay, this is another alert, maybe it's another false positive, so no matter, I will check later. And from the other side, if you will lose too many incidents, you will say, okay, this solution is probably not good enough because there are incidents in my network and I'm not getting this information. So one of the things that you really, really want to analyze before you even continue is understanding what are the true pain points and what are the critical junction in your environment and your organization before you start, clicking on the button and connecting all the log sources. So Sino will speak about it later on, and we'll say how we are mapping those security risks with the business processes. But when we look about Sentinel, for example, what I really like and really like in Sentinel is the ease of getting the right logs into our system. So as we said, for those who doesn't familiar with Azure Sentinel, in Azure Sentinel we have the ability to uh, onboard log sources really, really fast out of the box from our platform. So in a matter of a click, we can just go choose the log source that we want, and we can onboard it inside. And then with the right logs, together with, as I said, the logs that we are already getting from the cloud provider, we can optimize the cost, we can optimize the collection, and of course, as we enjoy from the cloud native infrastructure, we know that uh, there is no hardware that can fail, or there is no infrastructure that we need to maintain. It's already there.
Sagi, what about so we as Microsoft Gold partners, we should also be very open here. So a lot of people ask us and tell us that everything is great if you're in Azure and we had all these connectors that Microsoft has provided, but hey, I am an AWS house or I am a GCP house or I've got more on-prems that are not supported by Microsoft. So what about the custom log sources? What can we do with that, or how can we get that into our analytics?
This is a great question, Sino, and I think that if Microsoft is, when you speak with Microsoft, and this is one of the things they also raise. They say that this is a difficult question to answer, and I think most of our customers, when we started interaction with them, this is a good point that you raise. So if you look on the picture on the right, you will see that we have around 23 connectors. So this is a very old picture, and I think that Microsoft is doing an amazing work in order to add more and more and more data connectors and cover more and more log sources. But as you said, and this is the reality, they still doesn't have 100% coverage. So for this case, what we did in Fireproof is we built the Fireproof log collector, a universal log collector. This entire solution came into reality to help our customers to collect those security logs from log sources that are yet to be supported in Sentinel. So right now we know how we can connect log source from anywhere, and we don't really care about the log source itself or the type of log. Our universal log collector, we know how to connect to those cloud sources or on-prem sources, get the data, parse it, tag it, and even clean. So Ben also spoke about cost optimization. So a lot of the things that we are trying to do when we are doing custom log collection is to find the way always to optimize the events. How can we get the most efficient event from the log source? For example, we have integration with one of the log sources, and we're getting the information using API. So in order to get a real valued event, we need to correlate between multiple API endpoints. So we're not just connected to endpoints and getting all the information and put it inside Sentinel. We're really doing the work on top of the sample flow collector, and we know how to correlate from one endpoint to another endpoint to the third endpoint. Parse the data, build the schema that fits to our need and best optimize for the security operation, and only then we are sending it to log analytics. And by doing it, we can also work with other solutions like ADX and stuff like this to keep the rest of the events that are not critical for the security monitoring, but also save it for compliance and things like that.
So Sagi, that's a big statement there, and I'd like to sort of challenge you on that reduction of costs, because as we all know, and it's all our customers asking us the same question. How do we reduce costs with a cloud native solution that can scale up as much as it can, and how do we sort of manage that costs?
So this is a great question, and so we did a lot of work with Azure Data Explorer. So for those who doesn't know, Azure Data Explorer is a big data solution that developed by Microsoft. Azure Data Explorer is built with the same engine that the log analytics, which is the core of Azure Sentinel. So we enjoy the same KQL language and the same capabilities that we have in log analytics and Sentinel, also inside Azure Data Explorer. Now, as Azure Data Explorer coming as a PaaS, as a platform, the cost of having this solution is much lower than saving the data log analytics. So by understanding the right event that we need to Sentinel and the other events that are good for compliance, that are good for regulation, that are good for the report, the possibility of using this as a long-term retention is giving us the opportunity to shift the mess of the events to Azure Data Explorer and to reduce a lot of money by the retention and the processing of it. And another thing, as I said, because of the same KQL engine, the security teams, they don't need to adopt two new solutions because they can use the same KQL queries that they run on top of the Azure Sentinel and run them on Azure Data Explorer and enjoy the same capabilities. So you can go 1 minute to Azure Sentinel and try to get some kind of information about an incident. And when you need to go over and query long-term data or create a report that needed for some kind of regulation, you don't need to adopt a new skill set. You use the same skill set that you have for Sentinel and you utilize it on top of Azure Data Explorer. So
you're keeping the compliance guys happy by keeping everything in your Data Explorer, and you're keeping your security operations, reducing their mean time to detect and mean time to respond by getting that valuable information to Sentinel. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And when you see other, SIEM solution out there, so when you go and you speak about, the long-term retention, usually because it's not a cloud native solution, it's cloud-based or on-prem, it involves, a different type of storage, and then it give you, it request, it try to get you, you need another tool to use the data, you need to recover the data, you really need to maintain more infrastructure and more solution and more skill set. While using Azure Data Explorer for the analyst point of view, it's just changing, the target, and you use the same skill set, and you use the same queries, and you get the same performance.
Cool.
So, we spoke about, a lot about the infrastructure. We spoke about the skill set. We spoke about, the benefit of using the cloud native. And I think that one of the things that we spoke, and I also raised it in the beginning, is, how can we change our mindset when we're talking about security?
Good point, Sagi. And so typically, there are two approaches to monitoring, right? So the first approach is you typically look at the log sources and you say, let's ingest all the logs. Yeah, there are pros to this approach because the SIEM has all the evidence available. Okay, so your security analytics platform has all the evidence available, satisfies your audit requirements, but it also may increase the liability if no actions are assigned to these events. So, if for example, I keep telling my customers, Don't do a pen test if you don't have a plan for remediation, because once you discover something in an assessment, you really become liable for that discovered vulnerability. So you need to make sure that if you detect something, you have a plan to remediate it. So this approach is not typically useful for a rule-based SIEM, because this could result in wastage of time and storage across the thing. So, what do we recommend is that second approach, where we need to sort of shift our mindset of not just looking at the detect, prevent, and respond. So typically, we traditionally folks focus on the detect, prevent, and response. And obviously, if you cannot prevent it, you cannot prevent it if you cannot detect it, and you cannot respond to it if you cannot detect it. So it sort of starts with that detection. And if I complete the picture and build it out further, we should sort of adopt the practice of identifying scenarios. And this is where risk management comes into play. And sort of, they do it all the time. They always create high-level scenarios. And then what we do is go into more technical details into the scenario. So we can predict the evidence and look for that specific scenario in our environment. We can then map if these techniques are available, are identified, and then we can validate which scenario we might need to do prevention and response. So this ability to predict and validate will enable us to better align to the business risk using the capabilities of a modern security analytics platform. And what we have to kind of look at from a holistic point of view is take a top-down approach, work with a risk point of view, focus on what is more important, create a short and long-term roadmap, and demonstrate risk reduction on adoption of your security analytics platform. Of course, this requires some upfront planning and investment to ensure the focus, but that will save time and reduce risk over time. Risk management typically uses something like a FAIR methodology, and that's great. Using a FAIR methodology is great to build a strategy. And those of you in the call who are actually risk managers understand what an annual loss expectancy is, but it really does not cut the mustard over the time, right? Because you can set a goal using your annual loss expectancy, but we need to look at another layer to make the SOC actionable. This is where you can look at a framework like the migrate attack framework to perform mappings that can reflect back on the business risk and detection controls that can map to it. The business risk can then be analyzed, and the cyber element of that business risk can be mapped to a very limited number of undesirable events that could create a business impact that we call a negative outcome. Now, this negative outcome has one of many ways that it might be realized, and these scenarios can be found in the techniques that an attacker might use to compromise your organization. So at Cyberproof, this is the methodology we use to create what we call a use case. And, a use case for us has a definition of that identification of that threat scenario, the detection rules that are relevant to your security controls. This could be not just your security analytics platform, but it could also be your other security controls, maybe your DLP systems, maybe your EDR systems. And more importantly, how do you actually respond to this? Or what's the workflow or the response process that the security operation will follow in response to that detection? This is how Cyberproof ties this back to business risk. And to achieve this with our customers, we have a continuous improvement lifecycle where we understand that use cases are not a one-off approach. They are a concept which is needed to satisfy the needs of our customer. And they go through a cycle of design, build, develop, deploy, and continuously evaluate during the course of a life cycle, and give you sort of an experience for looking at your maturity, at the maturity of your security monitoring and response capability. And that's how I wanted to sort of bring to light of how we map that methodology of actually being able to identify your business risk and then tying that to security operations.
Yeah, thanks, Sinu. And I wanted to ask you as well, in the context of migrating to Azure, what are some examples of the content that would be part of that use case kit? I think you showed in the previous slide, the that use case content that, when packaged together, is the kit that would go along with that particular attack scenario. So, what are some kind of Azure Sentinel assets? Is it queries and playbooks, or what would you typically see as a kit that we would deliver to a customer? As you can see, we've got the use case catalog there that underneath.
Sure. Yeah.
So, can you tie that together? What is it that you would typically see in that use case catalog?
So typically in that use case kit, what we would see was the first that risk assessment to get you that threat scenario, the relevant analytics rule in your detection control, the enrichments that a security operations team might need to kind of bring in value to that alert that's being generated, or the detection that's being generated, the playbooks that define the response procedure. But also we are looking at the automations, because we want to make that response more automated. So we want to kind of look at what sort kind of automation can we deploy into that use case as we go along, and also the visualizations. So it's not just a one-time thing, right? We want to look at a long-term effect of your security analytics platform on that detection. So we want to build and do some of that visualizations as well in the use case kit. So a combination of these various factors together is what we deploy as a use case kit. And at Cyberproof, we've developed a use case catalog, which is a library of these use case kits that are available for multiple SIEMs, be it Azure Sentinel or various other SIEMs that we work with. We've kind of mapped this to the migrate framework and provided this to our customers. Does that answer your question, Ben?
That's perfect. Thanks, Sinu.
Great.
And I know that there's a link to XDR I wanted to cover as well.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of,
yeah,
sure, Ben. So what I wanted to kind of also bring out a message, I know it's not a key consideration, but, I just wanted to kind of bring the message that, the journey doesn't stop there. The journey continues. You have a security analytics platform, but as security is now moving closer to focusing on that organizational risk and rapidly detecting and remediating the active attacks, we need to look at going down into getting deep insights and sort of extending our threat detection scenarios down to the controls that we have. So typically the introduction of these extended detection and response tools at the base there, where you see infrastructures, platform as a service, OT, IoT, identity and access management, endpoint and mobile, your SaaS applications, your information tools that you use, are typically covered by some sort of extended detection and response tools and security controls. And what we as a partner work with our customers to look at the full integration to support the current and future security needs of your organization by enabling your security incident response team to actually work for both the detection from these tools, but also the response back to these tools, where a cloud-native SIEM like Azure Sentinel helps us to integrate back into these tools to provide that single pane of glass to our customers. That was just something that I wanted to kind of bring to light to tell you that the journey continues beyond security analytics. And also wanted to kind of go through a very quick case study for a customer that we've done, where we actually looked at their ingestion of cloud data, their on-premise data, had to optimize their costs. where, Ben, do you want to kind of look at what we did with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when looking at kind of the overview, just to give a quick abstract on the sort of company. So this was actually a leading BFSI company, over 220,000 employees. This was very much a matrix, organization that we're working with multiple entities and subsidiaries. So there were two key challenges here, really, and this is kind of one of the reasons why this was one of the largest implementations that we've gone through, because not only of the various entities, but because of the complexity of the organization, different processes in different regions. But the input challenges there were really around the extending that visibility to their public cloud, to their SaaS-based infrastructure, as well as maintaining that visibility of the on-premise data. So you can see it almost as if there was a lot of things that they needed to be able to collect and aggregate into Azure. A lot of custom connectors that needed to be built, a lot of optimization of the log ingestion and storage, because the amount of going from gigabytes to terabytes of data to close to 9 terabytes now by end of this year, which is a huge amount to be able to go through, cleanse and tag, make sure that they're complying with regional data requirements. So a lot of this kind of came on the umbrella of the input challenges. What is it they need to get in? How could we solve those issues for them to make sure that the output of that meant that they were able to freely go and carry out those more proactive threat hunting queries, SOC investigations, reduce that mean time to detect and respond, get relevant KPI-based reporting out of that. And that's not what they were getting beforehand. So, it's quite blurry. I appreciate it's difficult to see, but the key, the reason for this is because really it was a very complex architecture. So it would take too long to kind of cover all of this. But as you can see, the main pieces which we're calling out there is the fact that they had this legacy SIEM, which really wasn't working for them in terms of cost reduction, having to maintain that infrastructure. But they wanted to be able to leverage both the investments they'd already made in Google Cloud, in AWS, and Microsoft Azure, extend that visibility across their infrastructure as well as their SaaS applications, maintain visibility of their core IT, their private infrastructure as service, and transitionally move over to Azure Sentinel in a phased approach, that without having to lose that visibility of their infrastructure. So this is something that we're working a lot with customers. And when you highlight some of the key benefits, ultimately everything that we've gone through today in the webinar are the techniques and the methods that we've applied to this customer. So ultimately this meant that we're able to achieve that 90% increase in public cloud monitoring, whereas before they didn't have any visibility into that. We're able to reduce up to 40% of the operating costs. We're able to year on year increase that percentage of efficiency, operational efficiency, from 10 to 20%, really because of the introduction of Cyberproof Defense Center platform that acted as that single pane of glass, whilst enabling them to leverage a lot of those orchestration automation capabilities that they really wanted to use Sentinel for. And the box you can see there in the middle of the Cyberproof Defense Center platform is SIEMO. SIEMO is a virtual analyst that was able to help automate a lot of those alert triage and enrichment capabilities. And that ultimately enabled them to reduce that complexity. They had multiple investments. As you can see on the left, they needed enrichment from that. They had multiple network security technologies that all needed to feed in and collect logs from to enrich those alerts. So it meant that they didn't have to monitor multiple siloed platforms. They could do that all through the Cyberproof Defense Center platform. And ultimately, this meant adding a lot more value. And these points that we've covered already, this is just it's just a summary of some of those key points. So that cost reduction we referred to earlier, our universal log collector, Cyberproof log collector, which can really reduce that 40%. But by the way, when we talk about ADX storage, there's also a lot of benefits that go beyond just the cost savings, the ability to do that cross-platform querying for hunting, customizing visualizations and workbooks and reporting as well. So there is a lot of benefits that as Saki was alluding to, that we could leverage from ADX. Our R&D team were able to use that infrastructure as code model to deploy those customized coded infrastructures, in a matter of, just a couple of days, single click, we can do that. So, and then obviously the catalog, which Sinu covered, this is something which helps customers to be able to monitor the use case kits, but also to be able to focus those use case kits on the primary threat scenarios. And then the CDC platform, which we've covered quite a lot, which, one of the probably the points which we didn't mention before is actually when you're managing multiple SIEM platforms and you're having to transition to the cloud, how do you make sure you're maintaining that visibility across platforms, not just across your core infrastructure? And then the universal log collector obviously does more than just reducing the costs, but ensures that a lot of that data that's coming in from any sources, agnostic of the sources that any SIEM solution may already have connectors for, can be ingested as well. So we've answered a couple of questions that came in. I hope this was useful for everyone. We run out of time now, but thank you for joining. I hope this was useful. Here are some of the contact details. Please feel free to reach out to us, add us on LinkedIn. I also want to share my screen so that you can see our website. So as you can see, if you go to our website, you'll be able to go to our resources page. You can download materials on everything we've been talking about. Go to the blog site. There's multiple blogs that like Saki himself have written around how to optimize, make the most from Azure Sentinel, and how to be able to leverage IOCs to enhance those use cases as well. So please do check those out as well. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Sinu and Sagi for contributing as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.